lighting and rendering. We did get requests for lighting and rendering for both of us, so we thought that the best way to do it is to condense condense them in both of our lighting and rendering styles into one kind of presentation, which is why we have this special format today. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to the comments before we're gonna dive straight into the comments here?
Usually the tradition for this session is like, do you have any questions regarding what you, right? So although this presentation is very planned, unlike other presentations, I'm still gonna ask this question. Do you guys in the audience have any questions
Yes, we
regarding this
did.
topic?
Yes, it's like even though it kind of seems like a very formal like workshop presentation style, feel free to bring up any questions if you might have along the way. We'll be asking to make sure if you guys can follow along and like all sketch Saturday type of things, we're going to be learning, but we're also going to be having fun and drawing at the same time. There will be periods where we'll do like this kind of sketch stuff that we normally do, which is why we recommended for today we're to have those tablets ready. So now let's just go over what we're going to cover. For the for the first part, we're going to go over basically how I approach lighting scenarios for like the very simplified cute chibi anime style drawings. And after we learn about how to think about light like in an intuitive kind of sense, we're going to cover how we look at lighting from a more theoretical, fundamental approach of viewing it and relate back
Yeah,
from the fundamentals to the app to the intuition applications that I will be going over. Um,
yeah. And then
yeah,
after the break, we
yeah,
will shift from the lighting part from more of a rendering part where Jake will be talking about line coloring and this is going to be applied directly on the GDR we'll be doing in the prior part. So please stay tuned. After that, I'll be talking about some of the more realistic rendering techniques and the topics. And we'll be doing actually two. So for section 3 and 4, we'll be doing the two images you see on the graphic. So please stay tuned to the end if you want to complete them.
yes. And these color codes just indicate who would be the ones doing the speaking. Green is gonna be me primarily doing the presentation, whereas the blue is will be covered by Hiram. So which goes back to the first topic that we're gonna go over, which is, you know, thinking about a more intuitive like way of approaching lighting. Like if you're really new to drawing and you just want to, just want to draw like apply shading in a very simplified way to make your drawings look nice. I'll give a brief context of how I approach drawing, which is that my tastes are more suited to drawing cute chibi characters. So the way I approach lighting is that I do it very simplified. I don't really go that hard within the shadows, and I find that this kind of simplified approach of doing shading works pretty well in making the images pop compared to when it's just the base color. So I do think it's worth learning just a little bit of shading in order to make your images pop out a bit more, which is to go into now we're going to think about where do we put these shadows like in a more simplified kind of thinking style. And for the very simplified lighting for me, for the cute chibi drawings, I like to focus on identifying shading what I consider to be obvious shadows. And an example of an obvious shadow is I want to if I look at if we draw like a very simplified like front view of a character, I want to an obvious example of an obvious shadow would be like the neck area for the person. For the people that kind of want like a justification, like maybe you want like a reasoning for what we're thinking about of why the neck would be an obvious shadow. I would if I were to draw just the side profile like a very crude side profile of like someone's like face here, what we want to express is that the objective of like these obvious shadows is to just I give a sense of space within our drawing. We can see here that for a person, we're trying to give the illusion that the front of the head, there's this kind of space between the front of the head and this neck, where in our characters, we want to give the illusion that our characters look like this and not like their Minecraft characters, where it's just like this solid, where their head and like their neck is just this solid line. And if you kind of think about it, if in a natural lighting scenario, light would be coming from the sky in like this white space environment, and you can see that the head would be blocking like all kinds of light from reaching this neck. So that is how I want you guys to think intuitively, just where you should be placing the shadows. There's a front side to the face and a back side, which is the neck that would receive less light than the front of the head. So another place that'd be intuitively, I hope, pretty obvious where the shadow would be kind of towards the back side of the hair. You can see that if we try to if we try to have like light go in here, we want to express that this part of the face is more in front than this back side of the hair. So a clear way we would represent that idea of just having this kind of space is to just shade the backside of the hair like this. And another place that would be pretty obvious is that if we have draw something like a hat, then the hat would be casting a shadow. If we think about like this front to back thing again, where we have the side profile of like the person, and like this is their head, we would see we have the same thing with the neck part where there's like this kind of cast shadow where the light wouldn't easily be able to reach beneath the hair that's directly placed beneath the hat, and that is what we're trying to represent here. And I hope intuitively you can kind of see the justification reason and see how you would approach to seeing where you should identifying places where the light wouldn't necessarily be reaching places, how they interact with the objects. Another place that you would expect there wouldn't be as much light coming would be like um, this kind of area where you can see there's like this color, and we wouldn't really have light. The light wouldn't really be easily reaching this part of the area, so that's another part where we would put some shadows in there, as well as beneath, like underneath, like these kind of creases within the color itself. And lastly, last places where we would also want to include some obvious shadows would be if we want to express that the sense that this arm is like more in front than this arm, then one of the things that we can do to easily clarify to whoever is looking at your drawing that this is more in front than this is to just shade this part of the arm. And it also kind of works with the legs as well. If you have like one leg in front and one leg at the back, normally you would have these as like different colors. You'd probably like shade this in order to clearly identify to the person looking at your drawing that oh yeah, this leg is more in front than this leg. There's a sense of front to back going on, and I hope just thinking about hopefully that these shadows are a bit obvious to identify. Now you know how where to look for them. um, just making sure, is this part a little bit, is this part straightforward to you guys so far, or perhaps if you guys have any questions, I could explain a bit more on the reasonings.
If you have any questions and you don't want to talk, feel free to type it in the thread.
Yeah, feel free to type it. We'll be also checking like Sketch Saturday here as well if there's any
Great.
questions.
So make sure to pop into the thread, and if you can't find the thread, it's in Creative Gallery, and if you click the thread on the top, you can see the only threads we have.
If there's no
All right.
questions, we'll assume that it's pretty clear and we'll move on.
Yeah.
So now that we know like where we should be kind of placing these shadows, one topic would be we kind of need to know what colors to select for shadows. And intuitively, the way to think that most people think about shadows is that whatever color you pick for the shadow is just a darker color than the base color that you're applying the shading on. But I like to show you what happens if we just purely decrease the value of the color and use that as our shading color. So if you look at this the differences between these two colors, this is the color of this character's hair. You can see what I did for the shading for this back end of the hair is I just strictly just decreased the value of the hair. And for a more realistic kind of drawing, a like serious kind of drawing, this isn't that bad of an idea to do. But you can see there are kind of parts where for like a cute chibi kind of style drawing, these colors could look a little bit more lifelike in order to make it pop out a bit more and be more cute. So instead of just purely relying on decreasing the value of your colors to create your shadows, I like to instead recommend if you just want to if you just want to choose shadows like very fast, you just want a color that just works for your very simplified drawings. Just shade in a way that you both decrease the value and also increase the saturation. You can see what happened here was that it's something I'm just gonna coin right now as like diagonal shading, where you can see that I'm both decreasing the value of the color, but also going towards the right here to increase the saturation. Now, your art program might not have like this box formation, so it might not be as easy as just moving the colors diagonally, but just know that the actual thing that's going on here is just we're decreasing the value and also increasing the saturation. And you can see here the difference between increasing the saturation as well brings a lot more life into the colors for our shadows here. And another thing that we can do on top of the diagonal shading that also helps to bring more life to the drawings is we can increase the hue as well. Change the hue. We're shifting the hue. You can see for this color wheel, I kind of shifted a bit, and the most immediate thing you can see here is that the color of the tie has changed into something that looks a little more pleasing to the eyes. So do try shifting the hue on top of your diagonal shading as well to see if what works and what doesn't work. You can go in both directions. Um, this is a part where we would ask if this part is straightforward of how we just quickly choose the shadows for like these kind of simplified drawings, and where if you guys also had any questions on you need me to clarify where we should put these shadows in the first place, do feel free to say something right now or ask a question in the create a gallery thread. But it doesn't seem like there's any kind of questions so far, so
Yeah,
we'll move on to
we're gonna
just
dive into
practicing.
this practice.
Yeah, doing this
Yeah.
practice. Make this actually 5 minutes instead, but there should be we should have like a Photoshop file that is sent to you guys, I
Yes,
believe.
there is a bullshit sketch.psc. If
Yes,
you go
there's
to the bullshit sketch.psc, you will find this exact image. And
yes,
the practice is about is for you to put the color on this exact image.
yes. Please open Bochi sketch dot phd psd. You'll get this
PhD.
copy. You'll get this copy of the image. And we want to try to apply like what we just talked about to this Bochi sketch that we have with that's just purely the liner and the base colors. Um, with the idea of just putting in the obvious shadow and quickly selecting the shadows using the diagonal shading method. So I'll start the timer for 5 minutes. I'll just have it on the side. But give I'll let you guys know how much time we have left. And for if you guys want to follow along too, I'll be just going over how I would do this as well. So
Yeah,
I'll be just giving this
since
live demonstration. Yeah.
since this is everyone having their own files. If anyone feels confident enough to share their process, please do so, and
Yeah.
some one of us will comment on the side.
But for if I was to shade this using thinking about just the obvious shadows, well, one of the places that I identified was the back of the hair. So I'm just gonna quickly get the color of the base color of the hair with the eyedropper tool, and then I'll just do the diagonal shading method, quickly get that color in there, and start coloring in this back of the hair like so.
Hey, where's the file?
Oh,
All
it's
the
in the
it's
it's in the
in the
creative
background.
gallery thread. You can see if you go to create gallery, you should be able to access threads here, sketch Saturday, and all
I'm
the
gonna
three files
screenshot.
should be here. Should be in
Alright,
there.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So, back to just the live demonstration of doing this. Yes, we're just going to quickly sketch color in this backside of the hair. Another place that I identified that was going to be an obvious shadow is the neck. So once again, taking the color of the skin, shading it diagonally, doing a little bit of hue shifting there, and applying the skin color here for the neck here, and you can see that the hair itself would also cast a shadow on like the top of the head, so you can also add a bit of that, add a bit of shadow there at the top. And another place that I suggested was an obvious shadow would be around this collar area. So one what we're I'm going to do is once again take the base color of her shirt or whatever tracksuit jacket thing she's wearing, and also apply the diagonal shading just to quickly get some colors in there, and just do a very simplified kind of shading here around her jacket. And the same thing goes along for like the white parts as well. Um, gonna apply the same diagonal shading here. As for the hue of the for this jacket, you can kind of choose between like if you like blue colors, it's a thing of like warm and cool colors. I'll just do uh it on the right kind of hue for this to shade the white here. And basically, if we just thought about the obvious shadows, this would be kind of it. Another There are other places that you could put shadows if you can think of them. that would be a bit obvious. One suggestion would be you can see this the way we shade kind of works on like a situation where the light is coming from the sky. So another place where you could also add shadow to add a little bit of that depth in space is that you can put it on like this underside of her arm here to show that um, this arm, although it's like a chibi-fied, like flat kind of thing, arms are actually kind of cylindrical. So we would have this kind of idea where the bottom part would be a little bit more, would receive less light than like the top if light was coming down from the top there. So that's why we would add these kind of shadows beneath on the underside of the arm. And after that, it's honestly just by adding like those few obvious shadows. There's obviously more places that you can put the shadows, but just just making sure the obvious shadows are accounted for, you can see how much that actually changes the drawing here. It gives it a lot more uh depth to it than without the base color. So a huge improvement to our original drawing just by doing this very simple things here. And that is I forgot to give like an update to the time, but that whole demo was actually 5 minutes. So I hope you guys also had the chance to follow along or perhaps do it on your own on shading the character here. And if you guys want to showcase like your Boshi sketch shading, feel free. Ooh, that is actually kind of nice. She does do that thing where like the top side of her head is like kind of covered in dark, so like that is actually pretty nice. I can see that you went super hard on the saturation there, which to be honest doesn't look too bad. If anyone else wants to share their thing, feel free, but if not, we will be moving on to more lighting
Lighting.
fundamentals from Hero. Now that we quickly went over the uh
Yeah.
the TV stuff.
All right. I hope everyone's done with their poetry sketch. And yeah, I'm gonna start talking about a more different approach. So Jake talked about how you can get 9 by plotting 0 with 9, but I'm gonna talk about how you can get 9 accurate by plotting 9 with 1s together. So we're gonna think of light as a more fundamental approach. So what is light, right? What is light? If we reflect back to the science we learned, the light is kind of particle. Um, you put that into a more intuitive aspect, you can think of light as a water gun. So imagine someone shooting a water gun at you, except there's no gravity involved, right? So we can think of light as a water gun, where the places the water gun can shoot will be light, whereas the places that water gun can't reach will be shadows. We're gonna talk about a few metrics that determines what a light is, right? How a light appears. The first metric of the light is brightness, right? We have very dark, we have very dim light on the left, and a very shine light on the right. And as you can tell, if you have something with very high value, that will show the bright light. And the second factor of the light is the direction. So which direction is the water gun shooting from? If you're shooting from the bottom left, it will look like this, whereas if you're shooting from the top right, it will look like this. Third factor is the distance. So the distance here is whenever you have the light, you have the water gun. If you shoot the water gun from a far distance, right, the water droplet will get less concentrated and to be more sparsely populated over time. So that's why you see like dimmer light a more soft shadow where you are having a light that's like more further away. Whereas it gets closer, the concentration will increase, and the spot will decrease because if you shoot something from a closer distance, if the size is the same, you'll have a smaller size because it doesn't get as sparsely populated as the further away one. And if we look at the fourth factor, it's the size, right? That's a super obvious one. So if you have a huge water gun, right, you'll have something sprayed all over. Whereas compared to if you have a very small one, it'll just be a dot on the surface. All right, the last factor is color, right? So even if we have the same object of the same color, if you shoot a light with a different color, the light will change the color of the object or the places where it's sprayed. So if we think of the concept of a water gun, if the liquid is colored, when you sprayed it onto someone, right, the color of the area where it's sprayed to will change. I think that's a more intuitive way of thinking of light. But if you guys have any questions regarding the slides, please let me know. Okay, seems like there's no questions in the thread, but as always, feel free to just unmute yourself and talk about whatever questions you have. And moving away from light, we're going to talk about how these approaches applies on some of the common light sources we have, right? We just learned about the 5 metrics of light. Honestly, there's more, but just simplify it into 5. And some of the approaches are, we have some of the light we can see in our common daylight. The first type is pin light, which is our sun. You have a very strong brightness and highly concentrated and also very large. You can see the sun. It usually comes from the top, but it could have some directions. The sun usually looks bright white or bright yellow, although it could change depending on the time of day. So this is a pin light or a sun. The second type of light is the environmental light. So this is an example of the sky. Right? When we look at the sky, it is not as bright as the sun. And so we have this very dim blue light, for instance, on the top. And also the size is very large. It's just the brightness is not as large as the sun. The third light is a lot of people get ignored this a lot, is the reflective light. So what this is when the light shines to the ground and the ground bounces some of that light back to the object. So this is sometimes when you have the object shine in the bottom. That's the light coming from the ground. And the fourth light, the through light. So what this is when some object allows the light to pass through. So a very simple example we can think of that is it's paper. If we shine a flashlight across the paper, some of that light would get through, although it's not all of it. And you can see as this example here, some of that light is getting through this round object. So that's through light. Okay. Now we talk about the light. We're going to talk about the shadow that we think about. So something I like to talk about here is I don't like to think shadows as shadows. And I think that shadows is more of a man-made concept of common areas that doesn't have much light. So if we look at this highly detailed graphic, you can see as the darkness decreases, as the light received increases, right, the darkness kind of decreases, right? The very obvious negative association you can see from this graph. This is a short TLDR here, but there's some common places that doesn't receive much light. There's a couple circumstances. So the first very obvious circumstance is when if you think back to the water gun concept, when some people shoot at you with the water gun, your front gets wet, but the back it doesn't get wet, right? So this is something called a touch shadow, where the shadow is actually on the object. It's in between the for the places that's not shining on the object. That's a touch shadow. Second, the second case, right? We reflect back to the water gun concept once again. If someone shoots at you with a water gun, but you happen to stand behind some wall, you wouldn't get wet. The same concept is here when some object is blocking the light from shining through. This whole area here, including the floor, would not get light. So that's an example of cast shadow. Third circumstance, right? Think about it. If you have like water gun, like 8 people shooting at you, but you're inside a box, like there's no way they can get to you. Right. Same here. If two object is getting way too close and there's no way light is getting in, that's the example of occlusion shadow. Occlusion shadow is a shadow that independent of light source, it will always be dark. I actually have an example of occlusion shadow, what it is. So as you can see this in this image, right? You have all these places that's close to each other that doesn't receive much light. So all these places would be dark regardless of light sources. And yeah, typically occlusion shadow happens when two objects get too close and light is hard to get in. All right. And the last is a form shadow. So what form shadow is when some object is round. And the reason I put a quotation in the shadow is because it's not a shadow in the traditional sense. So what a form shadow forms is you can, when you have a round object, and how our eye works is it receives light that bounces back from the object. So when you have an object that's round, the area that's perpendicular to the eye will bounce back more light compared to areas that's like more parallel to the eye. So that's why when there's a sphere, you have those kind of dark areas on the side. Whereas compared to the area of the sphere that's perpendicular to the eye, it'll be brighter in comparison. So I'm gonna ask for question here. If any of you guys have some questions, please feel free to just unmute and interrupt. And but if not, well,
Hello.
hello.
Could I
Do you
ask
have any
about
questions?
cast shadows again?
Cast shadows, right? Cast shadows is if you think of the concept of the water gun. So when a water gun, so you know how I like compare light to a water gun that's shooting at you. When you have a water gun that's shooting at you, but you happen to be behind some wall, right? The area behind that wall would not get wet, would not get shot. So same concept with the light is when you get some light that's shooting at an object, the area behind that object, it kind of fails to receive that light. So the cast shadow is when the light shines through and there's areas blocked by the object that is not able to receive light. That's a cast shadow.
But like, so the light that is not hitting like the object, right? So you have the curve on the circle, right? Like would there like
No,
that there would still
that's
be
the
like attached shower, right? So
yes,
like that line just
that's attached shadow.
indicates. So like that line indicates where the attached shadow would be, and then the other part would be the cast shadow. So combined together would be like a spotlight on a person.
Yes, correct. So
Okay, thank you.
that's why I don't like to think about shadows as shadows because they are very complicated. If you think of the light, it's just one system, right? It's just you have the light shining to your object, and that's it. You don't have to think about all this shadow. But yeah, any other questions? Like, you know what? Some of you might have this question, right? If we learn this, right? A lot of people here are trying to like draw anime style art, and a lot of people here would ask the question that if we learn this, how this is applied to anime style art? Right? Is this even useful if you want to draw like anime style art? But yesterday I actually talked about Jake here, how like we can reflect back to his slide, but I actually thought of a more intuitive way to do this. Just, you know how like in high school kind of play this game called Kahoot. We're gonna we're gonna do this exactly the same thing.
So will these files be posted after?
Yes, this also will be posted in the chat. But if you guys can join this Kahoot, that would be great.
Whoa. You can join it on our phones and stuff.
Yeah.
Alright.
Anyone not in the Kahoot?
Wait, hold on.
Yeah. All done. 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 for waiting on one. You know, wait till
Yeah. You can give it like a minute just to make sure.
can I give a minute? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Seems like we have everyone. Do we have everyone? We're missing like one person. Right? It's 11. So it's 10. We're gonna wait till 10:45 and we're gonna start. Sorry, 7:45. Not 10:45. That's my time.
Here for eons.
Yeah. All right. Seems like everyone should be in. So we're gonna start the Kahoot, right? So, spoiler alert. So this Kahoot is about how those shadows, right? We're gonna do a reminder. So this is a task shadow, right? Memorize this, right? This will help you in the Kahoot. This is a task shadow. This is cap shadow. This is a occlusion shadow, and this is form shadow. And the Kahoot is about how those shadows applies in the common places. All right. So what is this shadow? Oh wow. Okay. Only four people got it right. So I'm gonna do some explanation. So in the neck area, so when the light shines through the neck area, so the head would block the light from shining on the neck area. So this would be more of an example of a cast shadow. because the neck, it necessarily, it's more like getting blocked rather than in the back. That's an example of a cast shadow. You got it. Right. Good job. Next question. Right. Good. Okay, most of you got it right. So this is an example of an attached shadow. Why? When the light shines on the top, the back here is not like straight, right? It's more like slightly slanted towards the back. So what happened in this case is the top of the hair, which is the back side, it would get the light, whereas the front of the back here, the area that's facing the front, it wouldn't get as much light as the back. So that's why you have this illusion of a shadow here. All right, next question. Okay, it's actually both. So sometimes during like when underneath objects on the hat, you will have this very close to the two object type of scenario here. So occlusion shadows would be here, but this is also a cast shadow because it's a top light. So when the sun is on top, you would have this cast shadow underneath the head. So both scenarios applies in this circumstance.
Wait,
All
sorry. Before
right.
we move to the next question, can you post the like little diagram and like
The
maybe say
little
sample?
diagram.
I forgot what a form shadow looks like. Like the one
Okay,
with
I'm
the
gonna post
buttercup.
yes. Oh, I'm gonna post the slide after
Oh,
the
after the
session.
quiz?
So
Okay, it's not open book.
yes,
Okay.
it's not open book, unfortunately.
Okay.
I feel like this is where the hard things come in. Okay. Okay. So why this is a cat shadow? So if you see in Jake's illustration, he likes to light his light in front of his character and on the top. So when that happens, you have this head, you have this face that's blocking the light from shining through the hair. You also have some of that area on the neck area. That's a lot of it is actually just cast shadow. All right, we got some people are hesitant to answer the two questions with the same answer, but same case was apply here, right? I guess that's why you can make the argument that it is a hat shadow, but for the rest of the places, there is a lot of cat shadow involved. For instance, such as the neck area and also the you call this body part, whatever this area is,
Like the
you'll
arms.
the arm, yes, correct. The arm, it will get blocked from light. So yeah, and I think the next few questions. Some of you may get the answer from what I said. So the next few questions is going to be left without shadows and more ball light. Okay. Environmental light typically wouldn't be this strong. When something is this strong, it's usually a direct light. It's when it's the sun, it's a direct light. It has some direction to it. You can see the clear division between the light and the dark. And environmental light, it's usually not this strong. I'll show you what environmental light looks like. Okay. Okay. Top left. If it's top left, this the body, it would get some kind of cast shadow from the head, and also the left arm, it might not be as lit as much. Also, the head, you will have like half of it in the shadow if it's top left. And the top, in this case, where you have the light shining directly from the top, the head would be blocking the body from receiving the light. Right? You have the head in front of like covering the body. And top back, for the one that's answering, if you have something from the back, you wouldn't have the face shine at all. You would have like a slight line. You have like a backlight. We have like a line across all the silhouette. That's example of back. And top front, that's correct because you have the face, you have the front part of the body shine. Yeah, most of the character is received the light. So this is an example of a top front light. Right. It's the color of the light. A reminder that the color would shift the hue and also the saturation. Right, so actually both white and yellow make sense here because when you have a yellow light, right, the bright part it shifts more towards yellow. But white also makes sense here because sometimes you could have a blue environmental light, whereas the dark part shifts towards the blue part. This too doesn't make sense because if we have green, the shadow would be closer to red compared to the light. So the light would actually shift downward to the blue area here. All right. All right. That's the end of the quiz. I'm gonna see. Okay, good job the entire way. And gamer is actually Jake, or is it not Jake? I'm not sure. But I'm gonna collect some questions before we move on. Okay, seems like there's no questions. Before we move on, we're gonna do a your time to shine. Sorry, I'm actually gonna show example of environmental light because some of you got pretty confused. So if we look at this image, right, if we look at this image, we can see. Okay, I guys see my cursor.
Yeah,
Jake,
we can
you
see
see
the
my
cursor.
okay. So what is the direct light in this image? So the direct light would be this very white part. That's the direct light. That's the pin light. Whereas the environmental light, you can see on the back, there's like a slightly dimmed blue on it. And also on the here. I guess it's not apparent on the here as much as on the back, but the environmental light would be always observant in the dark part. And there's also some circumstance on the leg as well, right? There's some kind of shades of blue. And also on the cloak, there's some shades of blue as well. And I'm gonna say like what is blue light as well, because yesterday when we're doing the demo, the demo audiences didn't understand. So what blue light is, so you can see that here in this one, like also the headband, right? It's showing some transparency via the light. So that's the example of a blue light. All right. All right, it's your time to shine. You're gonna render the there. I'm actually not gonna give a time limit for this, but I'm gonna start I'm gonna start my demo at 8. So feel free to start now. So what you want to do is to have a yellowish pin light and a blue environmental light, also some kind of green for it. So the reflective light would be green. I'm gonna chill for a bit and wait for questions, and I'm gonna start my demo at 8.
Yes, if there's any questions, now is perfectly the time to
It's
ask for any
perfect.
questions
It's
or
the perfect time to
clarification.
talk.
You can unmute your mic to ask the questions or ask them in the Sketch Saturday thread that we have. If you
Yes.
don't have a mic, perhaps.
Also, it's like the audience is understanding this topic very well.
Would it work if I'm rendering this view with like a hard edge brush or
That will be fine. That will be fine. Yeah. But I guess for like especially with the environmental light and the reflective light, those lights are pretty weak. So it'll be harder to show with a hard edge. So I would strongly recommend using either a airbrush or a soft edge brush or a soft brush.
Ooh, makes sense.
Okay. We do have you're something like art very much. That's the point of doing this. I'm glad to find this like art. Where we're trying to get more people into art by opening this kind of session every week. All right, it's 11 now, so I'm gonna start my demo. For those of you who wouldn't like to follow, I'm gonna start my demo. So we talk about the ground with like a green floor, right? I'm actually gonna shift the hue slightly to the yellow because we're having a yellow pin light. I'm gonna put the yellow thing here. I'm gonna create a sphere because we do have a blue environmental light. I'm gonna directly shift the hue to the bluish side. I'm gonna create a circle is I just use a G pen and then put it to like a very large line and boom, circle. And now we can shine a light on it. Have environmental light of yellow. Then do a very brief color. They wouldn't be super detailed. Right, so we mentioned that we want the light to come from top right. So that might be a bit too. Right, this is the main light source. And then we can add reflected light. Pick a color here, we shift it slightly to the green, and add it more. Okay, honestly, add a bit more saturation. We can also add some environmental light to like further highlight. And we don't want to forget the occlusion shadow. Now, very dark. And optionally, we can also add the form shadow. I'm gonna use multiply here. And I'm gonna use like an airbrush to just give it some kind of darkness. It's not the airbrush I want. I'm gonna use an airbrush around the edge just to give some kind of spherical and something. All right, that's a sphere render. I guess I forgot the cast shadow, but all right, I'll only mention you guys to render the sphere. And note that this is a very generic, very brief render, but you get the idea. You can see the main light, you can see the environmental light, you can see the reflective light, and you can see the occlusion shadow. Any questions before we move on? Okay, if there's no questions, we're gonna have a break time. We're gonna have a break of 5 minutes, so we'll come back at 8:10. And during this time, please grab water, whatever, and stuff after will be more intense, so be prepared. Ooh.
Yes, we'll be back after a couple-minute break. Just so it's a lot of learning, so do you want to have
Yes,
like that time to like cool off and take up
yes.
a bit of time to
Let's,
reflect on what you learned on the shadows.
yeah, as we have questions, yeah, just ask. Okay.
Right.
If you don't ask any questions, we're gonna assume that you understand this very well.
Oh, hello, whoever just joined. We are in a taking a bit of a break right now.
Yes.
But
Right.
after that, we'll be
So,
continuing on with the completely new, like a new topic more focused on rendering, not that isn't necessarily lighting related.
if you missed the part prior, don't worry, we have a recording. Probably the only second we have a recording. But yeah, we would be having a recording for this session, and if any of you do have questions regarding the recording, I will ask us later.
But of course, it's good to participate now in case you have any questions. We'll be
Dude,
this is a-
after he heard that, he just like digged out.
Yeah.
Okay.
The recordings are nice, but the best way to learn is, if you're confused, please do ask if there's anything that is unsure about.
Yes. The perks of having a Okay, the perks of participating in live is we can actually give you direction, right? If you watch the recordings, probably we can't give you as much. So yeah, please, if you're gonna watch the live, please.
You cannot embody the spirits of the recording to help you live on video. The
Right. Also,
technology isn't there
the
yet.
good thing about doing it live is we can ask questions and we can answer it for you at that context. Right?
But we're just about ending the break time now.
Yeah,
Hopefully, guys had a brief period, maybe got some water, cool off. But soon we'll be moving on
I would be moving
to
back to
yeah, the
continue the process.
next topic, which would be based on our intro slide. We'll be
Right.
covering for on my and just a little bit on line coloring. And what is line coloring? Well, for as a person who likes to draw chibi style cute characters, whenever I go online and look at other cute people drawings, this is kind of ubiquitous of a technique that they do in order to fully in their rendering process in order to make their drawings look even cuter. So, which is to color the inner lines of your character with the lines matching the color of the context. You can see that there's a clear divide between these two drawings in terms of um, line organization. In my opinion, this one just looks a lot more appealing to the eyes than the one to the left. And let me just briefly explain exactly where you would be putting these line colorings. If we just take a look at where I colored the lines without all these colors, you can see that a lot of these lines are just colored within the silhouette. We still want to keep the overall shape of the silhouette very visible and clear with the black lines. But the part that isn't part of the silhouette, we don't need to make it pop out especially as hard. So that is why we kind of blend it in with the rest of the colors with these colored lines, which makes it look a lot more lively in the end. So now that you know kind of along the lines, hopefully you guys know if it's not straightforward where like these line colors should go, please let me know. But now that you kind of get the gist of where we should be kind of coloring these lines, we need to know what colors do we use to color the lines. And basically the thinking involved here is that whatever color we use to color the lines, we want the lines to be darker than the color surrounding it. So usually it's darker than like whatever color that we use to shade the lines. In this case, as long as it's just darker or the same color, it should be fine. So a quick way to just color in the lines is, remember when I talked about diagonal shading? You can just do the same thing. It'll work for the line colors too. If you can't think of anything and you just want the colors in quick. So I'll just do the same thing here with the diagonal shading method and just quickly color in these lines. Like so, getting those inner lines in there colored, and you can see that just by doing that, the drawing just pops out a lot more than if it was just all black lines. And we do the same thing for the rest of the places where we can apply line coloring. And like I said, if you want, all it has to be is just a darker kind of color than the rest of the colors surrounding it. So you can make it even more pronounced with more saturated and less valued colors. If you want, you can even make it like the same color, like so. But the only thing to this rule is that you don't want to make the color of your lines lighter than your shading or like the rest of the colors, because you can see here that it kind of looks a little bit off when you look at it compared to the rest of them where the line color is a bit darker. So I hope this part of line coloring, it makes sense to you guys. It's just a trick that we can use to make our rendering while we're rendering out the cube drawings look even more pleasing to the eyes than before. And if there's no questions in the let me just quickly check if there's any questions in the Sketch Saturday thread. And if there's no questions impending, then we will move on to just practicing what was just told. Hopefully it's straightforward and you guys all hopefully you have like the Bochi sketch still on you, because we're going to apply this line coloring technique to our already shaded picture of Bochi, if you have it shaded or not. So like the previous sketch demo, I'll be demonstrating this live. I don't think we need as much time as before the shadow shading, so I'll just briefly go over this in a 3-minute kind of sketch. So I'll start the timer now, but I'll do a kind of demonstration of how I would do like this line coloring thing. So you can see here we have like these inner lines that we want to color. We want to make sure that the color of the lines is darker than like the shaded hair, so I'll just do another round of diagonal shading here and color in these lines as so. Sure to, and that's done for the hair. For the eyes, one thing I like to do for the eyes is that, you know, I make it. I also like to color the eyes too of like a different color. It makes it pop out a bit more. But just the overall shape of the eyes as well. That looks pretty good. Blush marks. You can increase for blush marks. You don't have to decrease the value too much. But you can just increase the saturation instead when you apply it to the skin from the skin color, and that part looks pretty nice when you do it like that. Like kind of face features, I just like to just do, take the color of the skin, do like around the diagonal shading, and just color it like so. That looks pretty nice. For the clothes as well, for tracksuit jackets, the way we choose the colors, just take the shaded part, apply another round of that good old diagonal shading just to quickly get the colors in there, and boom. We have these kind of shaded lines in there. The same thing for like this inner part for where the lines happen with the tracksuit as well. You can do another round of diagonal shading, and oops, that Now this is something you guys, if you guys, what I didn't mention was that the easiest way to do these kind of line changes is that you add a clipping mask over on top of your line art. Most art programs do have that, so that's the easiest way. You can see that whenever I apply like a color, it doesn't go out. It only colors in like whatever line details I have. So that's how I can easily color in the lines here without it really interfering with the rest of the colors. But you can see here that um, you this is kind if you have everything merged together, doing coloring the lines becomes significantly harder. So do try to avoid the pitfall of having your line art in the same layer as your colors, or else you'll end up with problems like these. Just a quick kind of thing that sometimes happens. But even if we just ignore that detail with the colored lines that we have already, this drawing looks pretty good with the line coloring on top of it. So I hope you got a chance to try that out and see for yourself that this actually kind of makes your whatever drawings you do look a lot more cuter when you're doing the more simplified anime stuff. And now that we just got like a chance to do like the line coloring, the 3 minutes have passed. If you guys want to share your drawing, your line colorings, feel free to do so. If there's any questions on this, if it's straightforward, like you guys got this process completely, then let me know if there's any questions, because we're going to go to a lot now that we have covered this line color and more advanced shadow stuff. We're going to go into a little bit more fun with a lot with a bit
It's an
more
application.
yeah, we're gonna go into a lot more advanced application. This is a little bit more of a detailed drawing upon the simplified drawing part, but what you guys should have is, if we go to the creative gallery here, we have a lighting example from me, the zero.psd, where you can get this image here with just the base colors. And what we want to do is that I want you guys to try out the line coloring, and also uh, try out doing all this part where we did the putting the shadows applications all into like this kind of more detailed line art process. So I'll give you guys 10 minutes to do this. You're not expected to complete this in 10 minutes, but do try to like focus, just getting like the overall kind of colors down. This is like your time to like really ask me any questions about the process, as we're focused on this part right now. And
We're gonna encourage the participant here to share their
yeah,
process, because if none of them share and none of them ask questions, it'll just be dead silence for 10
What's going
I
on?
will, yes. I will be giving a live demonstrations for people to follow, but it would be, I think the best process is if you guys like share like your process, like try to color or like do the line coloring things. Like you can us to like ask us for like help or something while you're doing this. But
What's going on?
oh,
I'm new
so
here.
minutes. Sure.
we have
So
Yo,
we
it's
just
me.
kind of for user who just joined, we are doing a Get Saturday session, and we have went through like some kind of theory and lighting theory of the journal, and we now
Oh,
are doing this practice.
yes,
Inside there's a
okay.
template we've provided, so there's no shadowing going on. So you
yes. This
Interesting.
is
as the
Well,
audience,
I'm not on a laptop, so I will just vibe.
then that is perfectly fine
that
too.
is perfectly fine.
I'm just basically just testing out the new Discord PS5 feature that came out like what, a week ago. So that goes hard. That makes me hard. That goes hard. All right, I'll leave you guys to it. I'll just vibe in the background.
Right. Thank you. But yeah,
You can also go through if you want your layering correctly.
if no one really wants to show their process, that's totally fine. But I'll just go through just a quick brief demo during this period. I've started the timer. Hopefully you guys got like a head start. We have like just briefly go that there's like 8 minutes left, but I'll be going over just a quick process of like even though this looks kind of complicated, we can just quickly add the obvious shadows and then it will already make like the drawing pop out even more. So let me just go over like a demonstration where I just put like some obvious shadows in here. Where did this thing come from? Yes, with the layer management where there's just that random dot there. Like, where did this come from? Um, so one place, like I always mention, the obvious place to put shadows. Classic. Have like a shadow at the back of the hair. You see, I kind of put like a line there as like a guideline for it too. That would help. That might help. Lines are pretty good ways to clearly demonstrate the separation between certain elements that are in the front. This one isn't as like this was pretty sloppy, but can still use that as a guideline for putting in the shadow lights here. We'll just make sure we have it showcased here as well. So we got like the back of the hair there done. The reason why it's a little bit more want to do something a bit more complicated is because we want to also try to see if we can fit in some of the stuff that Hiram has showed us about shadows as well. Things like occlusion shadows, where it happens around like probably around like these sharp corners. If you want to make it more pronounced, you can make this occlusion shadow a little bit more darker, using it just another round diagonal shading just to put stuff like have like these really darker areas where there would be occlusion shadows. Those, although they seem pretty small, when you have when you put in all the occlusion shadows, they definitely do pop out. So do try out some of the stuff that Hiram has showed us as well, on top of like shading in the obvious shadows. Another obvious shadow would be kind of like here. We have a lot. You'll notice that that I like to have like these kind of lines to indicate the separations between the light areas and the shadow areas. That's kind of something you can use your lines for when you're drawing, to like organize where lights should be, to help you really streamline this shading process. As for the other obvious shadows, always mention that the face area and with the neck is an obvious shadow. So we're going to do round a diagonal shade to color in the skin. Get some of the cast shadows in there from the hair. And we have like these kind of hands as well. It's kind of hard to think about like how you would shade like the hands, but if you kind of know like how like the muscles work with the hands, you kind of want to just follow line those kind of lines. We did go through like a hand tutorial, if you remember from a previous Sketch Saturday workshop where we talked about like the muscles. But if you do know them, then this is your time to shine, to know where you can kind of put like the shadows there for the hands. So adding those in makes it look a lot nice too. It doesn't have to be perfect, but something simplified this goes a long way for making your drawing have a lot more depth to it. Bit of these arms, they can also have, we see that this portion of the arm past the elbow is more forward than the arm before the elbow, so we can clearly indicate that by adding in these kind of shadows there to just make it clear that these arms are like protruding forward towards the person. Other places that I was going to go through more places, but I realized there is a bit of I am running a bit low on time here. Of like we are at 3 minutes, but we can see just by adding like these simple obvious shadows, it already pops. We added a lot of depth to our character compared to where it was for the base color. So I'm just gonna quickly go over now with the line coloring as well, because the line coloring is also important. Want to just do around a diagonal shading here and just color in like these inner lines of the hair. We want to make sure that we get all these inner lines for when we're doing the line colorings and making sure we kind of just color in all of these. Try not to disturb the overall silhouette if you keep those black. Another places where we can add line coloring outside the hair. Oh, whoops. Also add a bit of line coloring here where the hoagie is. Have that separation down. Another places where we add the line colors is like these fingers as well. We can do around the diagonal shading, quickly just color in the inner lines of like these fingers that are, and that looks pretty nice too. Things like elements of like this, her clothes, these kind of lines, these inner lines we can also line color as well. So we'll just do that around a diagonal shade, get color in like these kind of lines as well. I think I think you kind of get like the streamlined process of like how you go about it based on like this live demonstration. You kind of I hope you kind of get the gist that. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, I got interrupted for a bit, but I hope like at this point you realize like the rendering process is like kind of like just straightforward. It's like really streamlined. Like once you just understand like what you kind of want to like color and stuff, like it gets pretty automatic.
It gets to an
But
automated process where you
yeah,
don't
it's like
that.
an automated process, but it's worth the effort of going through because you can already see just how much that improves like the liveliness of the drawings. And of course, we want to make sure that these blush marks have like the cute colors in them. This mouth can also go through a layer of diagonal shading and boom. The end with just this is the end of the 10-minute practice time for my demo. At least we want to move on, but I hope guys got to try it out with just putting in like
Okay.
some shadows of your own and with the line coloring. uh these drawings don't disappear after like the sketch Saturday session, so if you didn't get to
Right.
finish it in time, you get to keep going at it in your own spare time. But yeah.
Yes. Yes. If you want to keep going, feel free. And if you have any questions, especially for the people who are watching this via recording, we can answer you if you DM or send in that Saturday thread.
Yes.
And we do have
Sketch
a
Saturday.
question.
Yes,
We
Sketch
have a question.
Saturday.
So,
Yeah.
so the shadow is on the front side of the hair. It's an attached shadow. If you mean by the front side of the back here, that means like the area behind the back. Yes. But here's the thing. This is why I don't recommend people doing shadow via like the shadows. This is really easy to get confused. If you think of it as light, where light shouldn't go, it's much easier compared to if you think shadows and shadows, because there's so much terminologies, and some of them I don't even know them until I made this PowerPoint. So yeah, do you think of I do recommend you to think of it as light, where light should be. The only exception I can tell you is the occlusion shadow, where that's actually universal, independent of light. So I think getting occlusion shadow separate from the rest of the shadow is like intuitively, for me, it's more intuitive. But again, everyone has their own workflow, so I will only recommend this, but I wouldn't say you have to do this. Right. Maybe. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
Yes.
I hope
Oh,
right now you guys are balling with this stuff. But we're going to move on from from like the chibi stuff into more of the realistic kind of ideas that Hiram will show us.
yes. Um, so this whole section of the realistic rendering is made due to someone, I think last week, mentioning that, why is my art suddenly just start to look realistic, right? So what causes realistic? What causes something to look realistic? And I'm not gonna dive into that topic right now, but I'm gonna dive in some of the topic that's prerequisite for that topic. So we're gonna dive into the concept of lines. So as you can tell, in real life, lines they don't really exist, right? It's only something you see in illustrations. So what is lines actually? What is lines, right? Lines. I'm gonna say this. The lines, they are a representation ultimately for the occlusion shadow and the form shadow. So some example can see this example. This is a 3D render. There is no lines, but you can kind of tell that on the edge of an object, right? It's slightly darker. This is either due to the form shadow or the occlusion shadow. Right? So it's not necessarily a line, but it's just in most cases the areas around an object seems to get a bit darker due to the form shadow and the occlusion shadow. And so we have some applications once we know this theory. So once we know that it is an occlusion shadow or a form shadow, we can recall back to what Jake said, that you don't want the color of the line to be lighter than shadow. Why is that? Because the color of occlusion shadow, there's no way to be that lighter than the color of some kind of a patch shadow or form shadow. Well, for the case of form shadow, yes, but that case only applies when you are having an edge of the line on the light part. So when the edge of your object is on a lighted part, that will be acceptable. But you don't want the edge to be lighter than what is inside of the edge. I think that's a good way to conclude this. Another application we can see is distance, right? So when we have two objects that's closer together and compared to the two objects that's further away from each other, we can use a thick line to represent this distance. What this is the occlusion shadow in between these two objects. So when we have like a thicker line, we can intuitively sense more space in between those objects. Where when we have a thin line, right, the distance is not as pronounced. This is one way you can use this advantage when you are applying this theory of occlusion and form shadow. Another, yeah, this is occlusion shadow, right? You can simply, by just adding the occlusion shadow, you can add volume to your line. And for people who don't know what I'm recommending here, this is a button on a cloth, and someone is like stretching to it. We can add the occlusion shadow here, and you can tell most people would think the line on the right is a bit better compared to the line on the left. It just seems a bit more volumetric. Okay. Now we talk about the line lines. We're gonna jump into another topic that's not really related to the line, but this is all a prerequisite for the last topic we're gonna talk about. We're gonna jump into texture. Right? We're gonna briefly talk about the metrics that affects an object's texture. So we're gonna reflect back to what we talked about in the beginning. So light is a water gun, right? It shoots out water. And the light is basically the water that splashes onto the surface. The thing about the objects themselves, right? Different objects receives the lights differently. So when some like calm person gets shot by the water gun, they will just like absorb the water. But when some mad guy they receive the water, they're gonna like be mad about it and have lights. Same thing as lights. When lights get shine on the objects, they'll have different effects. So what this means is we have a certain metrics that determines how a light will behave on a object. Right. The first metric is the reflectiveness of an object. So when the object is not as reflective, we will have the light be not as bright when it gets shining on something, and the shadows not as dark. Because the object doesn't receive light that well, it would have like more rounded and more like smooth graduation in between the colors. Whereas compared to a highly reflective object, you can see there is a clear division between the bright and dark. And we can also see those small marks that appearing on the dark side. This is due to the object receiving light extremely well. So you can see it has picked up a lot of the environmental colors and also the small bright parts in the dark part, in the dark area. And another thing that affects the texture is the smoothness of the object surface, right? When we have a very smooth object, it wouldn't have as much grittiness on the color, whereas when we rough it up for a bit. So for instance, we have like a rock, right? The rock on the surface, there's a lot of small holes on it. This is when the um, smoothness metric get affected, and to get this kind of feeling very effectively, this is when you use the texture brush. Right? I think a lot of beginners they heard to not they get advised against to use a texture brush, but in those places, once you actually understand how lights work, this is when you need to apply the texture brush. Okay, doing this by hand is highly not very effective. Last um, last metric I want to talk about is the transparency of an object. Right? I kind of talked about this in like the previous when I was talking about light, but when an object is transparent, the light will shoot through the object. Right? The dark part wouldn't be as logical. It makes sense because the object is more transparent. We would have the bright part kind of bleeds through the dark part. Yeah. The idea is like when we have like a more transparent object, you wouldn't see the shadows be pronounced as much. Also, had a very brief summary of the texture part. The reason I want to talk about the texture part is we're going to talk about what makes something that looks anime. And what makes it look anime. Or anime versus not anime, right? Well, we do have, what we do have is there's a certain factors that make something look realistic or not realistic. Before we show you these factors, I want to make a disclaimer that, okay, that's not what I'm looking for. I want to make a disclaimer that this is highly subjective and not one thing is better than another. And a lot of these choices are stylistic choices. So there's no correct answer to this. And this is a skill. It's not A or B. There's a lot of things in between. And you can pick your level based on your style. Right. The first metric is the line art. So for some kind of realistic render, typically you want to minimize your line art as much as possible. Whereas in the anime style, you do have the line art to be a bit more pronounced, right? The second factor is the form shadow. While in a realistic rendering, you typically see the form shadow being like fully rendered, and basically all of them like they actually make sense. Whereas in anime, you don't see form shadow as much. I don't think there are some animes that uses form shadows now, but I don't think a lot of traditional animes need form shadow. I don't think any of them do. The third factor is the graduation between colors. So in a realistic render, you kind of have infinite levels in between colors, so it's a very fine transition between colors and colors. Whereas in the anime style, you only have two levels. It's either the dark part or the bright part. Some of them they only have the base color as well. This is also a factor that determines the animeness of some illustration. You also have the texture. The texture in your realistic render, you would have full texture. You would render every object as it is. Whereas in anime style, you basically have all the objects in the same texture. And with the anime style, especially with a lower graduation between colors, you would be more limited to show the texture as well. So most of them, they don't really show the texture, except with like a highlight. Again, this is a skill, so you can pick anything in between, right? It's not A or B. And lastly is the detail, right? For a more realistic rendering, you want to get every detail possible. For a anime style rendering, you want to simplify everything to be the most simplified, right? So the more detail you go, the more realistic something will seem. Okay, we're gonna do an example. We're gonna do an example of the anime mix. Right? Okay, so we're gonna start with the most anime thing we can find. Most anime thing we can find. This is the most anime thing we can find. So as you can tell, very prominent line art, very obvious, and it doesn't even have a shadow. Nobody would mistake this as a realistic render. And we're gonna do the opposite end. So this, for instance, is a realistic render. Actually, this is literally a photo. So you can see like fully textured, all the form shadow are preserved, like infinite graduation between colors, and the texture they are very real, right? And all the details they are all preserved. We're gonna start to showing something in between. So this this is my waifu. Oh no, this is anime, right? This is what most people call anime. A lot of industry anime is they're detailed to this level, right? You have line art that's still very prominent, and you start to have more details, and also more levels between colors. So, for instance, this have like a highlight, so some texture is being shown, right? Which starting from the other end as well. So this is I think what most guys call like realistic rendering artists do. So again, I'm gonna show you some differences between this art and the actual photos. Right? In this art, you would have the background be less detailed, and the forms, like the shapes of the forms, it would be more simplified due to art reasons, right? Composition reasons. Sometimes simple shapes are better, works better in composition compared to more realistic and complex shapes. And yeah, so this is actually not fully realistic. Some of it is more simplified compared to, but you can see how the texture is also preserved and the form shadows is, and all the other things, they're also preserved. And it's also highly detailed in some places. I'm going to show towards the other end. Okay, so that's an example of game illustrations. Right? Most games they lie in between the real and the cartoon or anime games, I call it. So you can see the line art. You can see them now. You can see the actual line. Although like the graduation is still very fine, and you also have it's starting to have different areas of light being blocked, right? So you can see as here, like you can have what the light part being not as fine of a transition, but the texture they are also preserved and also the form shadow. This is most game illustrations go, especially like in North America. We're gonna show our final one. I think this area is one most people trying to go for. So this is the anime, right? The illustration style anime. So we can see here, you can clearly start to see the line, and we have like also have the form shadow, not as observant as Odo, and we're starting to have some texture being found, right? In the clothes, in this area, in the bag, and also in the hair. And you can see the detail level is also increased, but it's not as detailed as like some of the more realistic renderings. So yeah, this is a skill. This is a skill. This is not that we only have 6 types of rendering, right? You guys can understand what I'm saying. But this, you can pick your style by increasing or decreasing these factors from the list. You can swap your style by increasing or decreasing those factors. And it's not limited to 5. I picked those 5 because that's all I can tell. I think there's definitely more factors that affects whether your stuff looks cartoon or not. But I think this 5 factors, if you change them, you would have the most effect on your thing looking realistic or not. Okay, this is my explanation of what makes something look anime. And I'm gonna leave the time for a general Q&A before we move to the lecture.
Yes, this is like towards the end of the lecture, and after this we're gonna go to super fun.
Super fun.
Yeah, super fun like final sketch session. But if you had any questions about overall the whole thing, this is like the last chance that we're going to have to entertain like any kind of questions to ask about
It doesn't
anything.
it doesn't have to be questions regarding to what we have covered, but especially regarding what you have regarding the whole lighting and rendering topic, and what do you think with this? I'm
Right.
gonna wait for a few minutes for those questions to come in, since I think you guys like to type them.
So with the practice rendering, uh, did Hiram do his practice render within the first 30 minutes of
No.
the
I'm gonna do my practice render actually
after what?
after this.
Right.
Okay.
After this will be here the practice rendering from Hero's side.
So after this, you will see the first graphic being rendered. So this is what we would cover. We would cover this exact image. This is what we would cover after this.
And just a brief overview of like what we generally went over in this workshop, in case anyone forgot or came a bit later, is we went into different kind of lighting techniques and rendering techniques. I went through a lot more of like how you approach very anime styled, chibi styled type of simplified lighting approaches, whereas here taught us how to branch out from the animes and learn a bit more of how to make your renderings look more realistic. And that was essentially the kind of vibe we wanted to go to play on both sides of the anime side of the art community as well as the more realistic type people that prefer those kind of huge textures and stuff. But if there's no real questions regarding of what we covered or any kind of just general questions on lighting or rendering, then we could probably move on. But let's just give it like 2 more minutes, like 8:55, in case someone just thinks of like a question that they really want to like type down or stuff. So we'll get
You know
that.
what? I guess we can start on the explanation of the last exercise, right? We
Oh
can
yeah,
start
okay.
on the explanation, but if you have questions in between, feel free to type it in the chat or just interrupt me straight.
Okay.
Right. Okay. This is the final example. Right. We have a bare one, and I'm not gonna demo it through. I'm gonna show you what steps I've taken to make this become this. You know, I'm gonna show you what the fuck happened in between. Right. So okay. Um,
If you guys are coming
what
later,
do
right? Well, I just want to make sure you can find this PSD file within the Sketch Saturday thread. You'll probably have to scroll a bit up, but it's lighting example here.psd to get this exact
yes,
file. Yes.
yes. So how to get from this to this, right? Sorry, how to get from this to this? I think a lot of people are having these questions when coming to this session. So something I do is I do something called I'm using technology. Right? I'm using technology. We do have different types of blending layers, right? Something I like to do is to first, initially, we want to get the casting shadow and the attached shadow. So after the base colors, just bam, you use the multiply layer and just to apply the casting shadow and the attached shadow. You can already tell like this thing, it makes it already gives the stuff volume, right? This already gives the stuff a lot of volume. And I think this is the most important shadow on any kind of illustration is to get this correct. Because if you don't have this correct, it would lose its volume, right? If, for instance, I start to erase, this part, and you can already tell like it's starting to lose its structural integrity a little bit here. Starting to lose a little bit of structural integrity if I'm starting to like baking this incorrectly. Right? If you want to preserve like a top left light, you want to get the casting shadow and the attached shadow areas correct. This is the most important thing. And after that, we want to move to our ambient occlusion. So this is very small, but I've added some dark parts here and here. This is mainly to make our lines better and to make the thing looks more detailed. And those of you who cannot see as well, zoom in and you can see the differences before and after I added the occlusion shadow. So it's mainly on the light, but it does make some differences. It makes some shape pop out more. This is what I do for the occlusion shadow. And then we can add the form shadow. Right? The form shadow is when you have a round object and you have like you have like the front side and the side side. And the side sides will have like less value. So I can also use a multiply layer to use on the character and just apply this like very slight form shadow. I don't want the form shadow to be too strong because that will make the things look very realistic. That's something I don't want. And you can add the transparency, right? So in which areas we have transparency. So here you would have some transparency because it's like we're drawing strips of hair, so you will have some like different in between the hairs. You will have like some small areas that light can pass through. So there's some transparency, and also the fabric, yeah, some transparency. Right? So you can just apply the transparency by adding this very slight yellow glow. You're already starting to make sense, right? This is not that far from the final picture. Okay, so this is already not as far. This is 4 steps, right? We can start to add the light source number 2, which is the light coming from the sky. Light source number 2 is mainly in this area because a weaker light cannot overpower a stronger light. So you mainly add the environmental light on the weaker areas, especially in the quote unquote shadows. We can add the different other types of light. You can also add the ground reflection. I know I'm calling this part dark, but imagine if you have like a white ground, you can have this too. This technically doesn't make sense in this kind of environment, but if you add this, it will look better. So sometimes you make those decisions that doesn't necessarily make physical sense, but it will make something look better. So this is one instance where I did that. And you can have some color correction, right? This is some color correction, and then I use the overall layer to add some saturation to the focus part. Right? I added some red to the focus part, to the part I want the audience to focus, and I added some like blue part to add some blue hue to the part where I don't want the audience to focus. I shifted the focus more towards the head. The color correction I used to use the overlay layer, and then I further applied color correction using like actual correction layers. Where you can see I increased the lightness a bit and also use the curve. The curve, you need to play around with it to see what it actually does. But I think the curve is a very good tool to finally adjust the shadows. So as you can see, I use the curve to like further darken the dark area, but it doesn't really affect the light area as much. I made the whole drawing. And to make the hair shine, right? This is where the texture part comes in. So as you can tell, the hair, it does have like a shiny texture. So what shiny things does in common is the highlight. You can start to add the highlight. I also spread some like white light towards other areas to make them shine better. But mainly we can have the highlight in the hair. Mainly this part of that makes the hair. So after that, we have the whole mood complete. Right? This already doesn't look that different from this. I did some touch up with the hair, with the head area. So the touch up is something that I don't want to go too in depth about because it's really hard to talk about. But the touch up is basically start adding little details, starting to divide the big pieces into small pieces, and start to add more shadow and more light, more shadows and more light, and also adding more occlusion shadows to the part we have missed. Different things like that, all the things like that. And we can have like some line art correction, which further details this stuff. So this would be, if you see the hair from here, we have added some thin strips to like move out of the silhouette. That would make the whole thing look more detailed. It's very simple steps. It's not a lot of steps, but that's basically how you can make this to this. And I'm gonna start to take questions. What was the color correction? So the color correction was it's a subjective thing, right? So the color correction is when you don't think your color looks nice, right? Okay. It's when you don't think your color. So in my opinion, it looks kind of too white. It's not as saturated. So we can apply this color correction to make the thing look more saturated, but in a way. And those are the color corrections. This is, I don't really know how to talk about it, but basically it's to adjust the sliders to something you think it looks like. Okay. Any other questions?
So like the first color correction, like
The first color
it's
correction,
it's an overlay layer.
the overlay layer. Yes.
But like what
The-
is in this layer?
What is in this layer is it's two soft brush stroke. It's one, I think pinkish from here, like somewhere around this, and I just sprayed it gently to like, the head area. Another one is like from the blue area. I just spray gently to this area. And this is to make the head area more pink and the legs more, the dark part more towards the blue to give them the warm is in the bright field. And I think that's what most people like. Most people like the warmer color in the bright one and the cooler color in the dark one. Hey, if you guys don't have any questions, I'm gonna leave this time for you to practice with this, to play around and hopefully get the same result or a different result using a different light. Now you know about like different light sources. You can use all lights and apply it directly on the variable using different blending layers. All right, I'm gonna leave some time for questions and feel free to ask them right now.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay, I guess not a lot of people guys having questions today. So, all right. So I want to conclude this session. This is for you to play around. If you do want to share them, if you do want to play around with them now and share them, well, feel free to stay after the session and we'll take a look with you. But if you would like sometime later to play around with this on your free time, right, you can also do that as well. I want to shout out Jake for helping me to complete this session. And please go support him next week. You do have a booth at Pop Academy. So if you have some time, go give the man some cash. Right?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. All right. If there's no more questions, we're gonna formally conclude this session. Again, all the stuff, all the materials is in the Creative Gallery script. I'm also gonna post the PowerPoint of the session. And yeah, if you do have any questions regarding this, especially for the people who are watching the recording, please don't hesitate to send us a DM or a message in Sketch Saturday or anywhere, basically. Anywhere we can see.
If the audience doesn't have a question, perhaps I may be able to ask one.
Okay.
So for the people who are following the obvious could you still apply like the chibi kind of style lighting and rendering and still get something that looks nice with something as perhaps complicated like this? If
Yes,
the
obviously. Right? If you apply the chibi method, right? What Jake has talked about, right? The exact places where Jake has talked about. Underneath the neck, right? Back of the head, right? And the back, maybe. But
yes.
also like underneath the head, you can apply some of the practice. Although like I feel like it's fairly limited if you're using that logic. Just because you can only use one direction of light. Whereas if you use the white logic, you can apply light at all the directions you can think of. But yeah, Jake's method still works for something that's more complicated. If you do Jake's coloring, you can still get a result, although it's just only going to be top line. I hope that answers your question, Jake.
Yes.
Yes.
We
All
can.
right. The other people have questions. All right. If not, we're going to conclude this session. Series typing. I'm going to wait for him to finish typing. Or the recording to be uploaded here. That's a question for Ono, but we're gonna try to upload here or in YouTube some way you can see. Yes. All right. Thank you everyone for coming to this session. And yeah, feel free to stay after, but we're gonna conclude this session for. All right. If you do have a suggestion, once again, feel free to use the suggestion form. And right, this session is a result of suggestions from you.
Yes, please put in a suggestion for if you want to suggest future topics. It's within the Creative Gallery Sketch Saturday thread. You can find it there. It's in the pin. But yeah,
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a super detailed suggestion. You can be like general questions, just like, oh, I have this question, but I don't know what to do. Okay, you give some kind of session. That could be also acceptable. But yeah, please do some suggestions.
and we'll
Right, that's
do our
gonna
best.
be gonna be the end of the session today. And I hope you learned something. If not, I'm sorry, but
But make sure to submit a topic in case you want something more
yes,
specified to your needs. Chances are, if you submit a topic, we'll be able to reach out and get to it. Because
yes. All right.
Yep.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, and have a great rest of the day.